All right, so you wanted the inside scoop on all this chatter about Justin Trudeau's future as prime minister.
Lots of speculation going around.
Well, we've got you covered. We dove deep into this kind of heated Reddit discussion.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
And a pretty pointed opinion piece, actually, from the National Post.
Interesting combo.
Yeah, just to get you up to speed on everything that's going on.
Should be good.
And it's actually, like, fascinating to me how a simple ski trip can spark such a firestorm, especially when you consider the current political climate right now.
Yeah, it really highlights the power of optics in politics, doesn't it?
It does.
Like a seemingly, innocent vacation can suddenly take on a whole new meaning when you put it up against, calls for resignation and party turmoil and all that.
That's a great point. And speaking of, like, online buzz and everything, we started our deep dive in the, shall we say, passionate world of Reddit.
Oh, yes.
Specifically the Canada subreddit. I think we all know that place can get a little,
Rogaddy.
yeah, a little spicy sometimes.
A little roller coaster.
Exactly. It's a roller coaster.
That's one way to put it.
But this thread that we found, it did not disappoint. Okay.
Right, lay it on me.
The title itself was just like, oh, it was a real attention grabber. Okay. It said, Trudeau skis while his party unites and calls for his resignation.
Oh, I saw that one. The irony there is just, it's pretty thick.
It's thick, right? You could cut it with a butter knife.
Definitely sets the stage for a sarcastic discussion.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And the comments definitely delivered, let me tell you. A lot of users seem to see the whole, like, ski trip thing as a sign of him being out of touch.
Especially with all the political drama going on back home.
Right. One of the comments that really stood out to me said, at least he's bringing the rest of the party together. Which, when you think about it, it's funny because it, like, kind of reveals this truth.
What's that?
That everyone's united in their strong opinions about Trudeau, whether they want him to stay or want him to go.
Yeah, I mean, it really shows just how polarizing he is as a leader.
Oh.
Love him or hate him, people have strong feelings.
Strong feelings, for sure. Another commenter made this pretty biting joke. They said, funny to think of the 2 times he's united the party, his entrance and his departure.
Ouch.
Right.
But you know what, though? It does hint at a deeper concern that some people have about Trudeau's ability to, to keep the Liberal Party unified.
Yeah, keep it all together.
Keep it all together, exactly.
And it wasn't just like subtle jabs either. Someone actually compared Trudeau to Darth Vader for the Conservatives.
Wow.
I know.
That's
a little extreme.
It's dramatic, right?
But it shows how some Canadians feel about him. It's like he's this powerful figure.
Yeah.
But he's lost his way.
Maybe. And, it's interesting how pop culture references can be used to express these, like, complex political views.
It is, isn't it? I found this one comment particularly telling. It said, I went and saw Jimmy Carr and Jim Jeffries last night, and the level of booing when Jim Jeffries mentioned Trudeau's name was probably the loudest point of the whole night. Like, it makes you wonder if the online negativity we're seeing is really a reflection of, like, how the general public feels,
Yeah. It's like, it gives you a glimpse of what's happening offline, right?
Yeah.
Because it suggests that these anti-Trudeau feelings, they're not just, like, trapped in the online world.
Right.
They're actually spilling out into, real life interactions.
It's interesting. Now, it is important to point out that not everyone in the Reddit thread was, like, attacking.
Yeah.
Some people defended Trudeau's right to take a vacation, especially when you consider the personal significance of the location for him.
Of course.
One user wrote, I don't like the guy, but some of the treatment and hate he gets over personal stuff is way too far.
It's a good reminder that public opinion is never, black and white. Even in places like Reddit, where strong opinions dominate, there's still room for nuance and empathy.
Totally. So we've got all these strong opinions flying around online, but the question is, how much of this is just internet noise, and how much of it is a real threat to Trudeau's political future? To answer that, we got to dig a little deeper.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear more about this National Post piece. It's probably got a more in-depth analysis than we'll find in a Reddit thread.
Exactly.
It'll be interesting to see what they have to say.
Okay, so let's switch gears now. Let's go from the world of Reddit comments to the realm of professional political commentary.
Sounds good.
This opinion piece from the National Post is titled, Kelly McParland, Trudeau skis while his party unites and calls for his resignation. So even the mainstream media is picking up on the optics of this whole ski trip thing.
Seems like it. And the title itself kind of implies that McParland thinks there's a link between Trudeau's vacation and all this dissent within his own party.
Okay, so let's dive into this opinion piece and see what Kelly McParland has to say. So Kelly McParland, she doesn't really mince words in this piece. She just comes right out and says that all these calls for Trudeau to resign, even coming from his own party, it makes you wonder if he can really lead effectively.
Yeah, and what's really striking is that it's not just like a couple disgruntled people,
Mm,
on the outskirts of the Liberal Party.
yeah.
McParland actually points out that entire caucuses, like Ontario and Atlantic Canada, they've explicitly said Trudeau needs to step down.
Right.
That's a huge chunk of the party.
It is. It is. And even though the Quebec caucus hasn't made an official statement or anything,
Right.
there are rumors that they might be thinking the same thing.
Interesting.
So it's not just people complaining online.
No.
This is serious pressure coming from inside Trudeau's own party.
And then you add on top of that this Angus Reid poll that McParland mentions in the piece,
Oh, yeah.
showing support for Trudeau and the Liberals has just totally tanked, down to 16%.
16%. Wow.
It's historically low for them.
Yeah, that's got to be a wake-up call.
And it's really fueling this fear that the Conservatives could actually win the next election.
Yeah, it's like all this talk about, Trudeau fatigue and all that. It might actually be turning into real political consequences for him.
Yeah, it's looking that way.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the most impactful thing that McParland brings up
Mm-hmm.
is that she quotes some pretty prominent Liberals,
Yeah?
like Gerald Butts.
Yeah, Trudeau's former, what was he? Principal secretary.
Yeah, principal secretary.
Hmm.
And he describes Trudeau as sleepwalking toward electoral oblivion,
Oof, that's harsh.
especially coming from, someone who used to be so close to him.
Exactly. It's like, what does Butts know?
Right.
What's he seen that led him to that conclusion?
Exactly. And it's not just Butts either. Eddie Goldenberg, who was a key advisor to Jean Chrétien,
Yeah.
he warned that if Trudeau loses another election, it could have, and I quote, potentially fatal consequences for Canada. So these aren't just random people with opinions. These are people who really understand Canadian politics.
They've been around the block a few times.
They've been around the block, exactly. And they're worried.
And they're not just worried about the Liberal Party, right?
Right.
They're worried about the future of the country.
Exactly. And with this possibility of a non-confidence vote happening, maybe even as early as the end of January 2025,
Right.
there's a lot of pressure on the Liberals to decide what they're going to do.
Big decision to make.
Do they stick with Trudeau and risk losing everything? Or do they try to find a new leader?
Yeah, who can maybe, energize the party again
Yeah,
and offer a real alternative to the Conservatives.
exactly. And the thing is, while all of this is going on,
Mm-hmm.
McParland points out that Trudeau himself hasn't actually said anything about any of it.
He's just off skiing
He's off skiing.
while his party is imploding.
And it makes you wonder what he's thinking.
I know. And, this member of parliament, George Shahal from Alberta, he actually spoke up publicly about it.
Really?
He was pretty frustrated. He basically said, look, the Liberal Party president needs to just start a leadership race already. We don't have time to wait for Trudeau to make up his mind.
Wow. So it's not just, people on Reddit who are saying this.
No.
Even people within his own party are like, come on, we got to do something.
Yeah, it seems like the situation's getting pretty hard for him to ignore at this point.
So what do you think about all this?
Well, I mean, it's a fascinating case study in how quickly things can change, right?
Yeah.
Like even a super popular leader, someone like Trudeau, can suddenly find himself facing all this pressure from both inside and outside his party.
Yeah, and what's really interesting to me is how this story is playing out in, both the world of social media
Yeah,
and in more traditional, political commentary.
that's true. It's like those lines are getting blurrier and blurrier these days.
Yeah. But it makes you think, how much weight should we really give to these super passionate Reddit comments?
Right.
Are they actually reflecting what the public really thinks? Or is it just like, yeah, a lot of noise?
It's hard to know, right?
It is hard to know.
Yeah.
I mean, social media can sometimes make the most extreme voices seem louder,
Yeah.
but it can also be a good way to get a sense of what people are really feeling.
Especially younger people.
Yeah. So I think the key is to look for patterns in what people are saying online
Mhm.
and to think about how those feelings might show up in, real world political actions, like how people vote or if they donate to political parties.
So it's not about ignoring social media. It's
Correct.
about understanding what it can and can't tell us.
Exactly. And in this case, the things people are worried about on Reddit,
Mm-hmm.
They kind of match up with what Kelly McParland is saying in the National Post piece.
Yeah, they both point to this growing sense that people just aren't sure about Trudeau's leadership anymore.
Right, both within his own party and, among the public in general.
It's like the internet is giving us an early warning signal, picking up on these feelings of discontent
Interesting.
before they become a bigger problem.
That's a good way to look at it. And it raises some interesting questions about how social media is changing the way we talk about politics. But going back to Trudeau,
Yeah,
with all this pressure on him, how do you think he's going to handle this?
it's a good question.
What are his options here? And what could happen depending on what he chooses?
Yeah, it does feel like he's kind of at a crossroads, doesn't it?
It does.
Like, does he try to tough it out,
Right.
and lead the Liberals into the next election?
Yeah.
Or does he step aside, let someone else take over?
Big decision.
What are the risks if he stays?
Well, if he decides to stay, he's basically betting that he can turn things around,
Right.
that he can win back the trust of, his party, win back the trust of the public,
Yeah.
and actually, defy the polls and win another election. It's a big gamble.
It is, yeah. High stakes, right?
High stakes, exactly.
And if he loses, it could be really bad, right?
Yeah.
Not just for him, but for the whole Liberal Party.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If he loses after all this, it's going to look like he just, stayed in power for too long.
Yeah.
Like he didn't know when to quit. It could really hurt the Liberal Party going forward.
So staying is risky, but what about if he steps down? Would that make him look weak? Or could it actually be a good thing for the Liberals in the long run?
Well, resigning,
Mm.
it would definitely have its own set of challenges.
Right.
Some people might see it as giving up,
Yeah.
could demoralize some of his supporters.
Right, right.
And then there's the question of who would take his place,
Yeah, who steps up?
Exactly. But on the other hand, some people might see it as a really selfless act, like he's putting the party and the country first.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So it's kind of like he's in a tough spot no matter what he does.
He is, yeah.
It's like he's damned if he does, damned if he doesn't.
Pretty much. And it's interesting because, this whole situation, this isn't totally unique to Trudeau.
Really?
We've seen other leaders in other countries go through similar things.
That's true. It does seem like more and more leaders are facing this kind of intense pressure.
Right. And it's often driven by social media,
Yeah.
the 24-hour news cycle, everyone's got an opinion and they can share it instantly.
So maybe it's not just about Trudeau himself.
No.
Maybe it's about how we view our leaders in this digital age.
That's a really good point. Like, are we expecting too much from our leaders?
Yeah.
Are we holding them to some impossible standard?
Good question.
Or is this just, the way things are now? People are more involved, more critical.
Interesting. Lots to think about. Well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see how this all plays out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
One thing's for sure, Canadian politics, never a dull moment.
Never a dull moment, that's for sure.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. It's been really interesting to explore all this,
Yeah, absolutely.
Canadian politics, social media, the challenges of being a leader in today's world. It's a lot.
It is.
Until next time.